Why do bad photographers think that they're good? I'm sure you've all come across this either at your camera club, online, on social media, wherever it may be. You'll see a photographer who thinks they are the best thing since sliced bread and their work is, frankly, awful. But they genuinely believe that they're great. And I'm going to talk about this from my point of view and from my perspective and from my learnings over the years. I was obviously an awful photographer when I started out. I say obviously, maybe not obviously. Some people are good when they begin. I wasn't. Creativity doesn't come naturally to me. A lot of work was put in to get to the point where I'm now 10 years down the line. I didn't pick up a camera and suddenly go, oh, I understand composition, colour and all the rest of it. But I did pick up a camera and think I was amazing. And this is down to a thing called the dunning-kruger effect. And the reason I'm making this video is because my friend, who is a scientist, and I were discussing some of the things going on at the moment in the world and how people think they know the answer to stuff because they read an article somewhere and they have a little snippet of information on the fringe of a huge subject, and it makes them believe that they know a lot because they know a little. And it's a human condition. We'll all go through it. When I started out in photography, I started out shooting film. Not because I'm that old, but because I couldn't afford a digital camera. I bought a £200 film camera. I learned flash, I learned development, I learned printing, I learned scanning, the whole thing on film. I got a superiority complex just from that because I could look in a room and bounce a flash off the ceiling and calculate exactly what the exposure was, which is a useful skill, but it didn't make my photographs good. It just made me able to calculate flash exposure. So when I started food photography, I'd come from portrait photography, and I thought I was great at food photography. I looked at my images, I'd got the nice catch lights down the side, got a bit of bokeh going on in the background. I'm hoping to find some of these bad images and pop them up somewhere. And I thought I was really good. I thought I really understood what I was doing because I knew a little bit about it. I knew about the gradation of light on glass. I knew about, the depth of field and the exposure and the ambience and all that sort of stuff. I then had my work reviewed by a very, very, very good food photographer who basically told me there's nothing wrong with the photographs. They are technically exposed, focused, and composed, but they're not food photographs. There's pictures, they're snapshots. They're not great. If anything, they're pretty bad. And within the food photography context, they just don't even register on the scale because the food doesn't look good. Nothing about this looks good. It's just a picture. You're a guy with a camera who's learned the tech side of things. Now, it could have gone two ways at this stage. Luckily, I went, he knows what he's talking about. I need to address this. And I carried on working away and working away until I started to learn more and more and more. Now, if we look at my work from back then to my work from a year or so ago, there's obviously a huge difference. But one of the bigger differences is that now I realise that I know even less than I thought I did then. So I have more to learn at this stage in my career than I did at that stage in my career, which might seem counterintuitive, but I didn't know what I didn't know. And that's a tricky thing. When you need to get better, you either don't know how to get better or you don't know that you need to get better. Now, I've been doing a lot of portfolio reviews recently for photographers, and it's very interesting that the better photographers think they're rubbish and the not so good photographers think they're great. And it's very hard to explain to somebody that they're not great, or maybe even more hard to explain to somebody that they are great. I reviewed a portfolio recently and I thought someone was trolling me. The work was so good, I assumed it was some famous photographer trolling me. And it turns out it wasn't. It was this person who was so meek in their sort of understanding of their ability, and they just really didn't trust that they were good, and they knew how much more they had to learn, but without realizing they were probably in the, top 1 or 2% of photographers in the world. And they had no idea. They weren't even charging money for it. And the work was amazing. On the flip side, I had other photographers who thought they were the best in the country, in the continent, or whatever it may be. And their work was at camera club level. And these two things, they're very far apart. And it's what separates people who make it as a professional photographer to those who never really do. And obviously getting your feedback from somewhere needs to be from a good source. You need to get feedback from the right people. I could give you feedback on your documentary photography, but it wouldn't have the same merit as, say, Joel Merowitz giving you feedback on it. If I gave you feedback on food photography, it might have a bit more of a rationale towards it, or portrait, because I had a lot of time spent in that genre. But you need to get that feedback. But the most important thing is you need to accept that feedback and work out what it is you need to do next. So what's the point in this video apart from saying that there's a reason why bad photographers think they're good? Well, the point is this, and it comes down to self-awareness and understanding that whenever you start something new, you're going to go through this peak of thinking you know everything. And at any point, if you think you've learned everything, or if you think you're good at something, chances are you're bad. Whenever I think I'm great at something, I then find out that I'm not, normally through rejection. Now, a quick way to test this theory out is if you think you're really good at photography and you're not currently signed to an agent, send your portfolio to an agent, see if you get a reply. If you don't get a reply, you're probably not good. If you get a rejection letter, you're probably getting there. And if you get a meeting, you're probably almost there. And if you get signed, you're there. And that's a sort of a good test to go, well, where am I in the world? What am I doing? When I used to apply to agencies, they didn't respond to me. I applied to every agent in the country. And then in Europe, nobody replied to me. And it was another 3 years after that when somebody sent me a rejection letter and I celebrated with champagne because not only had they looked at my work, but they'd taken the time to go, this is not what we're looking for at the moment. It's not right. And that's a big step up from just going, I'm not even going to bother responding to this person. They're so far from the level they need to be at. And you have to remember that when I was at that rejection level, I thought I was great. I really did. Now, the flip side is as you do get better and better, you start to realize how little you know. And it's not things like how to set up a 20 light setup or how to focus stack and all this techie stuff. That comes at the very beginning of the career. That's when you're not good at photography at all, when you're learning these things, when you're learning micro contrast and how it affects certain settings, and you're learning about color palettes, you're learning about composition and substance and all these different things. That's the beginning. That's not when you're getting good. That's when you think you're good because you're learning so much and it's a great feeling. And I wish I could get that feeling back sometimes because when you're learning new things all the time, it is so exciting. And then as you've learned that stuff and you go, well, I know all the tech, that's when you actually start improving because that stuff then becomes almost like an autonomous thing going on in the background. It's like, I don't have to think about where these lights are placed and calculate the inverse square law because I've done it for over a decade. But what I do need to think about is the content which is coming out, how I'm delivering it. And, YouTube is probably a bad example because I'm very new to this. So I'm currently at the stage in this where I think I'm good at what I'm doing. And if I even look back to my first video that I thought was good compared to now, I can see the improvement. And I thought I was much better then than I was by a long shot. Right now, I'm very aware that I must think I'm better than I am. But I am aware of it. And eventually I'll get past that and think I'm useless when I'm starting to get better and so on and so forth. So I have some tips for this. Number one is if you think you're good and if you think you know everything, you've lost it. You've lost the game already. You need to go back and work out what you don't know. You need to go and get some feedback from somebody who can tell you what you don't know. Number two is if you're not sure, you need to find out a way to test it. I always have ways to test myself in that if I contact certain people, will they respond? If I send my book to certain people, will they give me an acknowledgement? And that's sort of how I gauge where I'm sitting at the moment. And then if you think you're useless at this, you're probably really improving very fast at the moment. You're probably in that great stage of growth and eventually you'll realize it and see how far your work has gone. I think it's really important to look back on your work. When I look back on my work from when I started to somewhere in the middle to now, the difference is huge, but at each time I thought each image was good. And that's great because every time you take a better image, you are better than you were. We're always improving. So next time you see a photographer who thinks they're great and actually isn't, rather than just thinking, you idiot, you know nothing, maybe try and help them politely. Don't go, by the way, because you think you're good, you're useless. Maybe just go, this is a great image. Have you thought about this? Have you seen this person's work? Maybe you should try and push it in that direction. Little things to help people out of this rut because I got stuck in it for a long time. I thought I was great for far too long before I realized I was useless. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.